Ei, você aí ouvindo um podcast, já tá pensando nas suas férias inesquecíveis para 2025? Conte com a Nômade. Com a conta internacional Nômade, você explora o mundo do seu jeito, pagando como um local, em mais de 180 países com cartão de débito internacional. Abra sua conta.
Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Thank you for listening to The Price of Football. If you'd like to listen ad-free, get access to bonus episodes, and have a monthly Zoom chat with me and Kieran, join the Price of Football Club today by going to priceoffootball.com. Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I almost forgot how to do it there, Kieran. I saw you grinning maniacally with your thumb up, going, "What's the matter with Kieran?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's my cue to start," which is my cue to start, basically. Everybody,
giving away showbiz secrets here, Kevin.
Absolutely so, yeah. Happy New Year to you all, and Happy New Year to you, Kieran. How are you? Never nice to be pleasant. Oh, you went away, didn't you, for a few days?
Yes, myself and the only chance that the Baroness ever gets to see me when I'm not working is if she sort of books us away for a few days. So yes, we went to Budapest, which is a beautiful city, I believe, but we had 3 days of freezing fog, so we couldn't see more than about 20 yards in front of us. And we went on an audio walking tour. And it kept on saying, and if you look up to your left, you look up and you go, well, there's just nothing there. so I assume it's a beautiful city. Food was very good, drink was very good, and the company was okay.
You've got to be careful when your partner books you these lovely surprise trips, though, as happened when Ali booked me for my birthday. I've always wanted to go to Pompeii.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I've booked us a weekend in Pompeii. And this was January. And I said, trouble is that's the last weekend of the season. And she said, I'm ahead of you, don't worry. You're 9th in the table. There's no chance of you going down. And I said, well, I'm ahead of you. We could be in the playoffs. But I thought, well, great, we're going to Pompeii. And then what happened was, of course, we didn't win a game between January and the last week end of May, which obviously was Ali's fault because she'd booked that holiday. So while we were playing our last game of the season at Stockport, which we had to win to stay up and also to survive, I was clambering around the ruins of Pompeii, trying to get a signal, which was impossible to do. There's no signal, impossible to do. And then the train from Pompeii to Naples is mainly tunnel, so I was just going potty about 6:15 in the evening. I still had no clue. And then as we pulled into Naples, I heard this huge yelp from the front of the train, and this bloke in a pally shirt came running back down the length of the train to say we'd stayed up. It was like, so, and then you probably missed something good on telly here because you couldn't see anything in Budapest. I mean, it's a lovely gesture from the Baroness, but you know.
It was, yeah. Absolutely.
And it's nice that you spent some time together. See, again, we've forgotten how to do the pod. We can't remember how to get onto the questions, Kieran. There has been, it says here, this is producer Guy's way of breaking this to you all. There's been quite a bit of news over the festive period, most of it Man United based, I have to say. Taking the money away from the Players' Benevolent Fund. Well, anyway, but we'll deal with all the news over the Christmas period on Thursday. Today is Questions Day. My first question, I have to say, Kieran, is to the neighbours of Anthony Taylor. If the neighbours of referee Anthony Taylor are listening, can you go around and see if he's all right? Because I'm worried about his attention-seeking behaviour with this. Kieran and I had a WhatsApp exchange about that worst penalty decision I've ever seen in my life. But it turned out that Saliba, far from headbutting, little cheat, had actually headed the ball first. But there you are. That's for another pod. Our first question is from Russell Earle. And I like the fact that Russell Earle starts by saying, this is a hypothetical question, as I haven't just won the lottery or got insane. which is because a lot of our listeners don't think that we see through their asking for a friend. No. But Russell Earl says in his hypothetical question, if you were rich enough and mad enough to buy or invest in a football club, my question is, which club is the most attractive proposition when thinking about current finances, stadium level in the pyramid and future potential? This is a subject that comes up from time to time, Kieran. It's always an interesting one to see how it's changed. And Russell says, surely for value, you'd have to look towards a non-league like Wrexham did. So, for example, Altrincham stand out with a rich history of 2 National League titles, FA Trophy winners, stadium and capacity at 7,873, and great potential to grow fan base because the town has a population of over 50,000. If successful, when looking at Macclesfield's and Bury's average attendances. So I probably put the wrong inflection there, Kieran. I didn't spot the comma, but you get the point. Woking, another example for a southern club, but I'm thinking a southern-based club would cost more than a northern-based due to the price of land. Now, the interesting thing about this hypothetical question, Kieran, is that probably all over America as we speak, there are people for whom this is not a hypothetical question, who are looking at English football and going, right, where is the next Wrexham?
Yes, indeed. And funnily enough, I'm due to have a conversation with Altrincham very, very shortly. In fact, I might be doing a little talk there. I occasionally wander up and have a chat to fans of clubs about sort of the usual nonsense. And Altrincham contacted me about this. So yes, they're in a very intriguing position. I used to live in a little village called Hale Barnes in Cheshire, and I used to walk to Altrincham and watch them play on a Saturday in the glory days of the mid-1980s. And it's always been a fantastic little club, very community-based, and it does have potential. But I've taken a look at Russell's question at a sort of a series of levels, depending upon exactly where you want to start, and certainly taking into consideration if you want to start at non-league or lower level. And I think it's quite a good book called Unfit and Improper Persons, which I'd recommend for anybody, any American investor out there who wants to start at the very bottom. But this is actually connected to one of the questions we've sometimes had on the Price of Football quiz. Which are the largest cities or the largest towns that do not have a professional club? So I've divided it and people are going to get cranky with me in terms of my geography, which isn't my greatest skill, I'm certainly. But if we start up north, if I was looking for a club to invest in within the 92, which has potential for acceleration, decent fan base and so on, I'd be looking at Bradford City. Yeah, they're getting fantastic crowds in League Two. They've got a relatively new stadium. They have been in the Premier League before. Yorkshire's it's a big footballing city, but also a big footballing county. So I think you could buy them relatively cheaply. I certainly am aware that the fan base at present haven't been in best humour in terms of their relationship with the owners, and I think it's got a lot of potential. And also, I think that their season ticket policy of if so many thousand of you sign up for it, you can get it for £149 is absolutely brilliant. It would make Jim Ratcliffe cry.
Yeah.
But the idea of football. But there's certainly a lot of scope there. But in terms of a town which does have the potential for growth, I take you to Wakefield. Wakefield Metropolitan Borough has a population of 350,000. That's more than Brighton.
Wow.
Yeah, that's more than Burnley. That's more than that's more than an awful lot of towns in the north of England. Wakefield AFC currently play in the North Counties East Division in League. I think that's around about. I think that's sort of level 7, tier 10. So you would have the scope to make your mark there, the book. It does take you through step by step, as you know. You think about all the research that you did, in particular, in terms of upgrades. So I think that has a lot of scope. If we then move into the Midlands, Dudley would be the place I would be looking for. Partly due to, again, it's got the Metropolitan Borough of Dudley's got a 300,000 plus stadium, so 300 population. Dudley Town live in what is my new favourite name for a football ground, Noose Lane.
Oh, wow.
So there must be a history on that, and I need to investigate that. They're in the Midlands Football League at present, and I think they're one of those towns, they're one of those areas which clearly I know we know Baggies fans and we know Wolves fans and so on. So they are it's a football mad area, strong historic links to the game. Currently in the Midlands Football League, scope to grow. If I was looking for a club to buy, I've always felt that Bristol is, it's not Bristol City. I remember Bristol City being in the old First Division, I think.
Yeah. Not for long, but 79 there was certainly.
That's right, yeah.
Division 1. Partly
but
because I remember getting chased around half of Bristol for the away game, basically.
yes. They weren't very friendly at times.
No.
And they've got a lot of money being put into the stadium. And to be fair, they're actually on a pretty good run at present. So they're not that far off the playoffs. But I think that Bristol is either Bristol City or Rovers. They're just been subject to new owners. It's certainly got the capacity to grow and deliver Premier League. If we take a look at the South, independently of Russell's comments, I'd actually looked at Woking. And I think that Woking you're looking for Surrey. So, Dorking, Woking. Surrey's not got a football club as such. I know some people will say, well, technically, some of the clubs in South East London might be in Surrey, but they're not. They're London clubs. So I think that would be an area of growth. And if you were looking for an existing club, my views would be either Charlton, because, it's a London club, third tier, got a decent sized stadium. It's got a pretty good footprint as well in that part of London. So it could easily, if it got to the Premier League, could easily be 20, 25,000 would be the regular. And the other club I'd be looking at, and I'm not saying this because I've got a bit of an issue with the owner, would be Reading.
Yeah,
because currently third tier, new stadium, Premier League history. I think it's close to the motorways. You could sell it to an American investor. It's really good for Heathrow Airport and so on. So those would be the ones that I would be looking at. And then, of course, you can go further afield. You fancy the Southwest and other places as well. But those would be the ones which would come up on my radar.
I have to say, Kieran, not only would you recommend Unfit and Improper Persons, but so would a chap called Andy from the Parsons Arms. Oh. Yes, who came up to me yesterday to say he got it for Christmas and he liked it so much, he's looking for some green and black merchandise. Which is
brilliant.
Yeah. And also, such as my geography is so bad, I'm fairly Palace are technically a Surrey team. Technically, we're at Surrey, although we used to play in the Kent Cup against the likes of Maidstone and Gillingham and Charlton. Charlton are one. I mean, it's Charlton in the 30s and 40s were probably the biggest supported club in London. They used to get 70,000 in there, so they're a huge. It does seem though, Kieran, it's the south. It's west of the capital and south of the capital. It seems to be that's when you look at the map of the 92 clubs. The trouble is with clubs like Dudley and Altrincham is that they are surrounded by other clubs. They might be in big metropolitan areas of their own, but it's a very difficult thing for a club like. Whereas you look at the map from above. Swindon, Bristol Rovers, Bristol City, and then virtually nothing down to Plymouth. I know there was a time when Bath City, they had an owner about 15 years ago who came in with a lot of money and disappeared with his tail between his legs. But it would seem to be that's the place you'd be looking for if you're hypothetical idiot or you've just won the lottery, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, there's Scotland as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I spent the morning, because we're recording this on Sunday morning, I recorded going through Traffic Scotland's website.
Of course you did.
Because they've given names to their gritting lorries. So you've got Gritney Spears.
Very good.
And others, Ice Baby, of course, and all of these. It's superb stuff. And these are the types of things which let's face it, everybody's fairly miserable like this. It's these things which put a smile on your face.
Yeah, or as I would say, when the weather's lovely like this.
Yes.
The other thing it's just occurred to me, the other thing you've got with Woking, of course, which is not only home to the sadly missed Short Lock, but you've got the Jam connection as well.
Mm.
You know, if you get the Paul Weller stand,
I've never forgiven him.
What's he done? Because you didn't get to see the Jam's last gig, did you?
Well, that was my fault, to be fair.
Yeah. So what
I've never forgiven him for breaking up the Jam.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes, you do bear a grudge for quite some time, didn't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Despite the fact that you're in, as you say, annoyingly chipper at times. I've had a lot of people over the holidays, people coming around the house asking about our relationship, Kieran. And so I found myself getting quite coy. Fire, Mr. Darcy. Michael, that's a long time that's taken to start as that first question. We're just easing our way back in, Kieran. It's our first day back at work. We're mucking about with the pencils on the office desk, essentially, aren't we? So that's what we do. Michael O'Houlihan has this question, and it relates to stadium valuation. I mean, it's a very interesting one, this, Kieran. Michael O'Houlihan says, on a recent pod, you referred to Derby County's Pride Park being valued at £81 million. Could you please explain how this value is arrived at? My interpretation would be that a football stadium is a unique, niche, single-purpose property. In this regard, I would not expect there to be a market which a stadium could be priced in. In terms of the site value on which the stadium sits, I would have thought that after factoring demolition and reconstruction costs for a new function, that £81 million seems exorbitant. And the reason I find this interesting, Kieran, is to me, it seemed too little. For what essentially any football stadium is essentially a huge chunk of property, normally in the middle of somewhere quite desirable that you could sell for a lot of money to build lots of smaller properties. So £81 million didn't seem that much to me.
Yes, stadiums and valuation is certainly a niche area, and it's a contentious area as well. In the case of Derby County's Pride Park, the £81 million is valued by professional surveyors. And they used a method called depreciated replacement cost. So that effectively says, how much would it cost us to do a full rebuild of Derby County Stadium today? But that would be a brand new stadium, and what Derby County have got is a stadium which is 25 years old.
Yeah, roundabout.
So if we were then to knock off wear and tear for 25 years, how much would it then be worth? So that's how they got to that figure of £81 million. And this was used to justify the sale of Pride Park to a company called, I think it was called Geller Nuco 202 Limited, which just happened to be owned by Mel Morris. And the profits from the sale of that deal allowed Derby County to keep within the EFL PSR rules. So it is a strange value because it's not based on market values. When I'm valuing a company, I say cost and value have got nothing to do with each other. So I wouldn't necessarily use a surveyor's value. That would really be for if I'd gone to the surveyor and said, well, how much do you think we could sell the stadium for? What's the current market value in a transaction? And I think this is where Michael's pointers come through, because as he rightly says, you can't use it for anything else. And quite often you will find that a football stadium has restricted covenants, which means that you can't use it for retail, you can't use it for domestic, you can't use it for office space, and so on. So therefore it is a very much a single use, single function asset. And then if we take a look at what's happened with Pride Park, it all got a very bit odd, because Clowes Construction, which is the company which bought the football club from the administrators, bought Geller Nuco for £1. or bought the assets of Glen & Co for £1 and paid off a 21 million, 22 million pound loan, effectively saying that the value of the stadium for the deal purposes was 22 million pounds. So it does seem that either Mel Morris paid far too much at 81 million, or it was a convenient valuation to allow the club to organise its affairs in such a way that it didn't have to go and suffer a points deduction. And I've got no issue with that. I think that's fine. It also allowed Mel Morris, and I know this is content that we've covered before, to have certainly influence, if not control, over the course of the administration of Derby County, because certainly there were other interested parties who wanted to buy the club, and I'm not talking about the likes of Chris Kirchner or the fake rich person. Mike Ashley was very interested in buying Derby County, and from my sources, and I can't say I can't follow this up necessarily. From my sources, Mel Morris didn't like Mike Ashley.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, he says, well, you can buy Derby County from the administrators if you want, but if you're only going to buy the stadium, I want £100 million. And Mike Ashley says, well, I'm walking away. So it allowed Mel Morris to have influence. And this is one area that I think we've discussed on many an occasion on the podcast, that the separation of football stadium from football club has classic unintended consequences. But going back to Michael's comment, it's how long's a piece of string when it comes to valuation of stadiums, because you can get a surveyor to come in and give a legitimate value on the basis of, we would value per 1,000 seats this figure, and so on. And certainly when I think the EFL had Derby County up on a charge, Derby successfully defended, and I think they had our very good friend Nick DeMarco involved in this. The EFL were trying to value Derby's stadium on the same basis as that of Morecambe or some of the smaller clubs, and it was poor work, whoever was working on the prosecution case, and Nick, of course, successfully defended that very well.
Well, you've begun to answer the question that I wanted to ask you, which is why I found this question from Michael so particularly interesting. So if you were to compare, say, if you were to value the New Den, Millwall's ground, and you were to value Dog Kennel Hill, Dulwich Hamlet's ground, would you start with a baseline? Would you say, right, every football stadium is worth at least £5 million? So we work up from that. Would you then go, right, this stadium's got 4 covered sides, or all bigger covered sides. This stadium's got 10,000 more seats. Would the fact that Dulwich Hamlet Stadium is in slap bang in the middle of prime real estate, upmarket Southeast London, and the New Den isn't, so that's why I find Michael's question interesting, because it does seem to me that, I mean, you can't really compare the value of a 1-bed terraced house with a 3-bed detached house, but there'll be at least, you'll be starting at least at £50,000 in London, certainly, and then you build up from there.
Yeah, yes. I mean, certainly you take into consideration 2 issues. First of all, land, and then secondly, permissions. So it's all very well having a piece of land in London, but if it is protected in terms of its use, you think about the value of Hyde Park. You can imagine if a property developer managed to go and buy that, they would have to go and pay an absolute fortune if they could then convert it into swanky apartments and so on. But if there are protections over the use of the stadium, then that does have a significant factor. Sometimes you get very callous owners who will come in, buy a stadium, and then say, I want to use it as a football stadium. They've got no intention of doing that. And then they let it go to rot and ruin, and that they play a waiting game with the local council, because if it then starts to fall down and become decrepit, if the owner then says, well, look, I'm not going to pay for the maintenance of the stadium, you've now got 2 choices. It can become a local eyesore, and eventually we're going to have to stop playing football there, because we won't be able to get a license for it, or you can grant me, or I'll try to negotiate a deal that it can be used for another purpose. And I think some of the regular clubs in recent past may have had owners who had that particular mindset. I'll say no more than that.
Okay. Ed Ritter has our next question. Ed Ritter is an American fan. Hello, Ed. Ed says, as a long-time soccer/football fan in the US, well done, Ed, the focus on Wrexham on this side of the pond feels a bit cringy. Their story, although it is a good one, gets told because of their celebrity owners when there are so many stories of clubs in our country that can't get any oxygen. So, having said that, can you provide an estimate of the net profit or loss for Wrexham since Ryan and Rob have taken the helm, both on an operational basis and after capital investments? It appears they've had to replace the pitch at least twice. There's a new stand in the works. And also the high-profile sponsorships they have. And please account for Aviation Gym being owned by Ryan Reynolds, which makes it sound like an exam question. Accounting for it. They surely generate better income than most or EFL clubs. Can you define how much the club earns from the documentary series?
Well, I'll answer that last question first. No, you can't, unfortunately. Wrexham's accounts are pretty good these days. I'll give the club a lot of credit for that, and they are pretty well detailed. But they've not actually broken out that. What I found intriguing about Wrexham's accounts is that a quarter of their total revenue comes from overseas. So I presume that includes the relationships with Aviation Gin and TikTok and United Airlines and so on, because those would be effectively global sponsors. Wrexham's revenue between 2019 and 2023, and all of these years the club was in the National League, I think it was, it quadrupled from £2.5 million to £10.5 million. Looking at the losses, and Reynolds and McElhenney, they acquired the club in November 2020. So between that season and 2023, which was effectively 2.5 years, they lost £8 million. And that was despite all of the benefits of the globalization of the brand, having international sponsors and so on. And the reason why the club was losing so much money was due to the fact that it invested heavily in wages. I estimated in the National League they were paying an average of £3,000 a week, and certainly some players, and I think some high-profile players, were on at least twice that, which is unheard of as far as National League wages are concerned. And if you talk to people in League One and League Two, they were saying, players were willing to drop down 2 divisions to join Wrexham. And look, it's a professional job. It's a professional career. You follow the money. And the reason why was Wrexham was able to be offer very competitive wages, not just by National League standards, but by the standards of the 2 divisions above, which was put them in a strong position. So they've lost £8 million in terms of the general finances. In terms of putting money into the club, I think you can probably at least double that. So they're probably down somewhere in the region of 18 to 20 million pounds with my overall estimate. But if they were to sell the club today, then they would be able to sell and recoup all of those losses. If I was on the buying side of a deal, I would have something what we sometimes refer to as an earn-out. So if you take over a company, so I used to sort of do some freelance work for a company, very high profile owner in that particular industry. And the new buyers said, we want to buy the company from you, but you've got to commit to work for us for the next 5 years. And the amount of money that we will pay you will be linked to the amount of profits that they make. If I was looking to buy Wrexham Football Club, I would want to buy it with Reynolds and McElhenney as part of the deal for 5 years, because they are part of the brand of Wrexham. The local pub, the city itself, the way that it's sort of embraced football and has embraced them as owners is certainly been great from a broadcasting point of view. But Wrexham without the 2 owners is worth substantially less than Wrexham with the 2 owners, and it's in their interest. And to be fair, look, they're actors, they're professionals. It looks really genuine in terms of the enjoyment and the support that they get from the relationship with the club. So I think they probably will become they are lifelong fans. So they would want to keep that relationship, but they are certainly part of the brand. And on the basis of that, they could certainly sell it and make a profit.
That wage figure, Kieran, is incredible, considering the amount of fuss there was, particularly from the Accrington area, about Salford bringing the player down from Scotland and then reputedly paying him £3,500–4,000 a week. Everyone thought this was a astonishing, terrible way of trying to buy your way out of League Two. And here we are with Wrexham having 3 or 4 players on that level of wage.
Well, yeah, my understanding was the highest paid player at Wrexham in the year they were promoted was on £7,000 a week.
Wow.
Maybe wrong, but
Okay.
I heard that from a good source.
Okay. Evan Cairns has our next question. It's a simple one, Kieran, but it's about money, so you'll like it. Evans says, if a club pays a fine on behalf of a player, is it classed as a taxable benefit in kind? If not, how is this allowed?
Right, Evan. I think the issue would be, what is the fine for? If a player got fined for a red card, I would expect the club to pick up that tab. Because if you were to say to players, if you get a yellow card or a red card, you're going to get an automatic fine. Or you and I, we're old enough to remember park football. And if you got a booking, it was steep. It's normally £12–20. And this was going back 30–40 years. So it was a big hit, and you'd always have to go and pay that. So you always try to keep on the right side of the referee. If players were being fined automatically by the local, and I think even if you are Manchester United, if you get a yellow card, I think you probably still do get a £12 fine from the local county FA, in some way, shape, or form. But what you don't want to do is to disincentivise players to commit fouls, because if they are going to get a fine from the Premier League or the Football Association for yellows or red cards, then they might say, well, it's not worth me doing this because it's going to cost me so much money. So those footballing-related fines, I think they would come under the part of the cost of doing business, and therefore there wouldn't be any taxable implications. If, however, a footballer is fined for a non-footballing reason, such as a social media post, and we've seen some comments in the press which have perhaps not necessarily been things you'd want to stand by in hindsight, or I'm certainly aware of some footballers who seem to think that speed limits are advisory rather than mandatory. I think is the politest way of describing them, and they end up with speeding, with driving bans and so on. If the football club picked up on those and paid those, then that would be deemed to be a benefit in kind. They would be taxable, and that would be something you'd have to submit as part of your tax return.
When we were playing Sunday football, one of the regular referees was the father-in-law of our left-back. He got a lot of yellow cards. As the left-back's relationship deteriorated, he would get more and more. And also, because at that level, there's only about 8 refs anyway, so you get them on a regular basis. And he hated our captain. He thought our captain was a real fancy Dan, would just book him for any particular. Also, he was supposed to be deaf, but he could hear swearing from 100 yards away. Basically, that's somebody needs to write a sitcom about football at that level. Our penultimate question comes from Mark Goodchild, and this has been driving me up the walls. I'm sure I know Mark Goodchild, but I can't for the life of me recall well. One of Ali's oldest friends is called Catherine Goodchild, but he hasn't got a brother. She hasn't got a brother. So then I think, am I thinking of Mark Goodyear? But he's not.
I thought of Mark Goodyear as well.
Then he's not an old friend because I'm not, from what I can gather, I'm not world famous, in which case he probably would attempt to be my friend. But whatever. It's a good question for Mark Goodchild. Mark says, I've been thinking about West Ham's amazing deal and their rent of £3 million a year. How does that compare with the interest payments for new stadiums recently constructed in London, i.e. Spurs, and I suppose Arsenal, he says grudgingly. Also, how much will they have paid when Spurs have repaid the debt? I presume it means how much will Spurs have paid when Spurs have repaid the debt, rather than West Ham in rent over the same period. I don't know. You may have answered both questions, Kieran.
Yes, if West Ham actually published their accounts, I think this was something like at 5 p.m. on Boxing Day. Yeah, it was a really weird time, and it made me very unpopular, as you can imagine, with the Baroness, because the spreadsheet needs to be updated and various charts need to be put out on social media for this.
Because you have to do it straight away, Kieran. You can't wait till after the repeat of Doctor Who.
I get twitchy.
Oh, okay, all right.
I start to get very, very angsty about. I can't let the numbers alone. There might be some trends I've not identified before. She's very, very tolerant.
Yeah, she's.
So yeah, West Ham's rent's actually now gone up to nearly £4 million, but it still does look a bargain, because if we contrast that with the position of Spurs, there are two costs in relation to Spurs Stadium. First of all, there is depreciation. Now, depreciation is the equivalent of amortization on a player transfer. So if you sign a player for £100 million over 5 years, you say 100 divided by 5, we're going to say it's a cost of £20 million a year. If you buy a piece of real estate or another significant asset, you say, well, how many years do we think we're going to use it for? We take the cost and we're going to spread that over that period. That's what Spurs have done. I think they're spreading the cost of the stadium over 50 years. But even so, their depreciation cost compared to West Ham's cost of £4 million in rent is £72 million a year. And on top of that, you've got the interest cost, and the interest cost, Spurs have negotiated a fantastic deal in terms of the borrowings. They don't have to repay anything until, I think it's around about 2037. They're probably paying around about £25 million a year in interest as well. So the total accounting cost per year is around about £100 million for a 62,000 capacity stadium, compared to West Ham paying £4 million a year in rent on a 62,000 capacity stadium. So it looks as if Spurs are getting a raw deal. The opposite side of that is that Spurs are able to monetize the stadium for 365 days a year. And we've seen recently that Haringey Council have said, we can allow you up to 30 days of non-football events a year. They can probably bring in £3 to £4 million from an NFL, from a Britney Spears, from a Beyonce, from whoever it's going to be. So they are getting that money back. Whereas West Ham, if LDCC or whatever it's called, says we want to have some other events. So I think myself and the Baroness, we went to see the Foo Fighters play at West Ham Stadium. That money is kept by the landlord. So it is a good deal for West Ham. Nobody's denying that. It does look very expensive in Spurs books, but Spurs have tripled their matchday revenues, and they've also almost tripled their commercial revenues on the basis of the move. And on a net basis, they're actually better off than West Ham.
Well, you said it was very cold in Budapest, Kieran. I imagine it was quite frosty in your bedroom on Boxing night after you spent the rest of the evening going through West Ham. There you are, casually with the feet up, toasting your marshmallows by the open fire, having a lovely Boxing Day evening, and then in comes West Ham's account. Sorry, darling, I'm just going in the next room. Our last question comes from John Cowley, and it's another interesting one, Kieran, a proper accounting one. John Cowley says, for clubs who have a year end of the 30th of June, does this not cause problems with the timing of transfers, given that one team may wish it to fall into the next financial year, while the other may need it to fall in the current one, as the transfer window starts mid-June?
Yes, this certainly does have ramifications depending upon whether you're on the buy side or the sell side of a deal. If you are a selling club, so let's take the case of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, because it's a deal that you're aware of. He was an academy player, so no cost to Palace. He was sold on the 30th of June. Was it 2019? I think it was something like that. for 40, 45 million pounds. So that allowed Crystal Palace to book a profit of 45 million pounds into their accounts for that year. Really good for PSR purposes, really good for if the club wants to be able to quote headline figures, lots of positives. So from a selling club's point of view, having that sale before the 30th of June can be hugely advantageous, unless you don't need the profits in that year's accounts. Because remember, effectively, under the PSR rules, you're getting the benefits of that deal for 3 years. So if Palace were in a really strong PSR position, I would have said to them, delay the sale until the 1st of July 2019, because that means that he goes into the 2019-2020 accounts, the 2020-21 and the 22-23. And so you always have to do a little bit of sort of foresight in terms of whether you need the sale or not. In terms of the buying club, I'll be honest, it makes no difference from an amortisation point of view, because when Manchester United bought Aaron Wan-Bissaka for that £45 million, they had to charge 1 day's amortisation. So 45 million divided by 5, the 5-year contract was £9 million a year. 1/365th of that is 30 grand. It's not going to make a blind bit of difference to Manchester United, one way or the other. But what it does impact upon is your level of debt, because as we've seen in recent years, every single football transfer is done on credit. And the club which tends to use credit more than any other tends to be Manchester United. So that would have had a significant impact. Also, when people are doing analysis, they've now got sort of the worst of both worlds. Aaron Wan-Bissaka goes into Manchester United's accounts for 2018-19 because he was bought within that tax year, or that accounting year. So therefore, he's deemed to be part of the squad. And if we take a look at Gary Neville's comments, I think it was on Boxing Day, he said that pound for pound, in terms of squad cost and wages, Manchester United have got the worst in the Premier League. So I went and checked those numbers, and indeed Gary Neville was correct there. But if you bought a player on the 30th of June, you've got the cost of the player going into that calculation, but you've not had the benefit of that player in your squad for the year. So that is sort of a negative. But John is right in that you might have a buying club say, look, we don't want people to think that our debts are huge. Would you mind delaying the sale until the 1st of July? And then it comes down to the selling club. So, we need it for PSR purposes, or if we don't, then we'll go along with your wishes.
I hope Gary Neville gets the same angry emails from Man United when he criticises the club that you get when you criticise the club. That would be very unfair if he didn't.
He's not very popular at Manchester United, is Gary Neville. You
could have stopped at the popular. You didn't have to. He's all right. I like Gary. He's fine.
I get on fine.
Yeah,
I'm making my debut on the Overlap, I think, this week. So,
is it? Oh, okay.
So, I've pre-recorded that with Paul Scholes and Jamie Carragher. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure there'll be people throwing, not him again, for Christ's sake, get him off the telly.
Did you talk to Paul Scholes about playing cricket?
We did.
Did
yes,
you?
Yes, and he remembers running out big and daft.
Does he?
He's a man of few words, Paul Scholes.
I know.
Very few words. But he remembers that. And he also said, he said, knocked his glasses off with a bouncer earlier in the innings. I'm going, I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Does he remember the Well, actually, to be fair, Paul Scholes is not that tall, so it wouldn't be that much of a bouncer, would it? To be perfectly honest.
True.
Does he remember the Prowler?
No, those were pre-Prowler days.
Oh, pre-Prowler days, okay.
Yeah, we recruited the Prowler from one of the Rochdale teams.
Did you?
In due course.
Did he have to apply? Because in my experience, if I saw an application form and it said name the Prowler, I probably wouldn't take it any further in the recruitment process, to be honest.
The Prowler, to be fair, was quite legend already in South Lancashire cricket. It was quite a coup with the Prowler joining us, and he had a moustache which was a bit like that of Merv Hughes.
Oh my lord! Okay, we'll put that down for the sitcom as well. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com, which is where you'll also find all the details about becoming a member of the Price of Football Club, where you get all sorts of benefits for peanuts, is what I'm going to say, Kieran. Peanuts. We'll be back on Thursday with what will be a bumper news pod, I imagine. I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you everybody for being in contact over Christmas and responding to various bits and pieces, and also some of the very kind words that people said in terms of the fact that we did put the shows, because we're fully aware of, as blokes of a certain age, that loneliness in old men is something that we're aware of in some of our affairs, and people say you're part of the family and extended family, and that is really, really touching. There are a variety of ways that you can support the show and the Price of Football Club, and we're looking forward to doing some of our sort of live broadcasts for club members and the additional shows, the additional question shows and all. We're planning those for January, and there will be those every month as well. There is another way, a non-monetary way that you support the club, and that's to give us a review. Me and Kevin, we don't understand the mechanics of how it works, but we know that it works because producer Guy tells us, and he's the man in the know. It doesn't matter what you say as far as your review is concerned. So you could even say you would rather have it presented by Paul Scholes and Father Christmas, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us, but I suspect it wouldn't necessarily be a very long show.
Well, Father Christmas, legendarily a man of very few words.
Exactly.
Beyond ho, ho, ho and on Dasher, on Dancer, it's difficult to get anything out of him. But still more than Paul Scholes, I gather. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.